Hey there, this is Blinn, your favorite Baha'i under construction. And today we're doing part three, welcome, aloha, of my deepening on the hidden words. We're going to be starting today on number 7 of the Arabic. Let's get right into it. Number 7, O son of man, if thou lovest me, turn away from thyself, and if thou seekest my pleasure, regard not thine own, that thou mayest die in me, and I may eternally live in thee. Very formal. Now I like to read it as if it was conversational. So, Son of Man, if you love me being God, if you love God, turn away from yourself. And if you seek God's pleasure, regard not your own, that you may die in God, and He may eternally live in you. This is one of those that kind of drives me nuts, and I have a hard time with it. So maybe you have a hard time with it too. So let's see what we got here. If. How many times have you heard, if you love me, you'll do this? That sounds like conditional love. In the human world, it's kind of faulty. But with God, it's not, God isn't faulty. So I guess we have to make a determination as to, okay, not faulty. This is just matter of fact. Matter of fact. So if I love God, if you love me, if I love God, I have to turn away from myself. Well, a few verses ago, wasn't I created a long time ago because God loved me? So why do I got to turn away from myself? Um, Now I know the self can be selfish, and I notice that the word thyself in this verse is one word. It's not two words, thy and self. I don't know if that, you know, makes that, if that's a difference or not, but I do notice it. And every word, remember from the word of God, is transformative. Turn away from thyself, and if you seek my pleasure, if you seek God's pleasure, regard not your own. So we're also told that we are invited to enjoy the pleasures of this world as long as we don't let it get in between us and God. Now, also, God has a mission for all of us and a purpose for all of us. The purpose, I understand, is in the short healing, the short obligatory prayer, which is, I bear witness, O my God, that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee. Which we can't really do on our own. We need help. And we also probably need help, I think I do, to turn away from myself. Now, sometimes the self, especially if it's not capitalized, is the lower self. I think it's interesting that Baha'u'llah doesn't say turn away from the lower self. It seems to me he's saying turn away from yourself completely. And if you seek God's pleasure, my pleasure, don't regard your own. So sometimes I can see where, let's say you derive some kind of pleasure in doing something that's against Baha'i law, let's say drinking alcohol without a doctor's prescription. And you may get some pleasure out of that, but you'll also pay for that. You know, it's against the law. It's also not exactly great for your body. And if we want God's pleasure, then we should not regard the pleasure that we want to have in drinking alcohol. Uh, so he would be pleased with that. But on the other hand, what if I wanted to serve my parents in a certain way, or a loved one, my husband, and I wanted to throw a party for them or something. And that party, nobody else can go to it unless it's on a holy day. Well, we could invite them all for the holy day, I guess, but some people might be uncomfortable with that. Which way do you go? I mean, you could do both. You could have the Holy Day celebration, and you can invite those who would like to come because you don't have to be a Baha'i to come to a Holy Day celebration. You do have to be a Baha'i if you're going to a feast. That's different because it talks about the business of the community. So I can see where, all right, I don't want to say the word compromise, but because you shouldn't really compromise with God. And the entire concourse is laughing right now. Well, anyway, but hey, gotta have some purity of heart, right? Gotta figure this out. It's not just let's read it and see what happens. I mean, you would hope it isn't just the fact that we read the word and it transforms us. We have to put it into some kind of action. It doesn't mean you have to become a monk, because Baha'u'llah states that in the most holy book. I can't remember if it's the Tajaliyat or the sections of the holy book where asceticism is not the thing to do. You are not to become a monk or a nun. You are not to, deprive yourself of that which God has created, which brings pleasure, beauty, art, music, all that kind of stuff. But I guess it has its proper place. So let's see what else we got. That I may die in God, that thou mayest die in me. Why in him? I mean, that's a pretty strong word. I have to, I don't want to say that word. You know what I'm thinking. Why do I have to die in God? Because, I mean, his breath, his spirit is in me already. Why would I? It just seems like we have 20,000 martyrs in the beginning of this revelation who had no problem whatsoever. No problem. They're in a different station than I am, I can tell you right now. No problem whatsoever giving their lives, literally. And it wasn't a fun death. These guys gave their lives for the faith. I am so far below them. Sometimes I don't even know why I was chosen to learn this. Oh well, there's some kind of meritorious deed in there somewhere. Probably screwed that up by now. I have a problem with that. Now, when it comes to the lower self, yeah, we're supposed to basically kill that lower self. Not kill, the body, but we're supposed to, the higher self is that which is the self of God with laws. So we're obeying the law. So we don't go, let's say, well, I don't know, for some stupid reason, I want to go and take all the toys from that kid over there because I want the toys. First of all, that's stealing, and it's mean and unkind, and all those things are against what God would like, which is what? His pleasure. And as much as, especially little kids, but hey, adults do this too, would like to go over there and take what is not theirs, then that has to be killed, either in the mind, the heart, or whatever, I would think. That has to die and not come back. Now, I think the lower self is always there. Some people call it the dark side, and we have one. But the light side embraces it, but decides, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Now, that is where the free will comes in. Do you decide to do that or not? All right, so if that thou mayest die in me, and I may eternally live in thee. So God May. Is it may can or may permission or maybe? Eternally. That's a long time. Live in thee. In other words, live in you and me. If we if we die in him, he lives in us. Again, I have to ask, why does he have to live in us? I mean, he does give us the breath of life, and we should be grateful, but he doesn't need us to live. He doesn't need us at all. Uh, Maybe he wants to. He mentions how um, we should see with his eyes, hear with his ears. And I think to myself, I don't have your eyes. I don't have your ears. How is that? How? And would you really want to? I mean, perfect as they might be, they're not as perfect as God's. So I'm not quite sure what to do with that. Hopefully, that gives enough to ponder about. So I'm going to read one more time. O Son of Man, if thou lovest me, turn away from thyself. And if thou seekest my pleasure, regard not thine own, that thou mayest die in me, and I may eternally live in thee. Let's go to number 8. O Son of Spirit, there is no peace for thee, save by renouncing thyself and turning unto me. For it behoveth thee to glory in my name, not in thine own, to put thy trust in me, and not in thyself, since I desire to be loved alone and above all that is. Now that sounds pretty familiar from the Bible, where you shall love the Lord your God with all your mind, strength, and all that stuff, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Pretty common, and pretty much the commandment. So I'm going to read this as if it was a regular conversation, especially in my neck of the woods. O Son of Spirit, there's no peace for me save by renouncing myself and turning unto God. For it is best for me to glory in his name and not in mine own, and to put my trust in God and not in myself, since he desires to be left alone and above all that is. All right, let's dissect it. There is no peace. No peace. How much do we want peace right now? Can't have peace in the world without peace in the individual. Save means accept, right? There's no peace except by renouncing myself. Again, this is similar to the one we just saw, and I believe Baha'u'llah puts these verses together for a reason. So, they're related to each other. Plus, they're fine on their own, I think. No peace save renouncing yourself. This also, to me, reminds me of our um, prayers for detachment, that we are supposed to be detached from everything in this world, not necessarily detached from the neck up, but detached from, hey, you really love this thing you're doing, or you love your art, your music, whatever. Uh, it's still, you have to detach because God is one and he's above it all. He's the one that created everything that we like and don't like. So, on the other hand, if we really don't like this thing over here, or we have to detach from that also. Doesn't mean we don't care. It means we have to detach enough that we realize that someday we got to leave this planet. We got to leave the planet. So those who might have a lot of riches and they put a lot of effort into it and work into it, thinking that was the reason for success. You can die a happy person, can you? Because you got to leave it all behind. You only take you with you. So I might have something to do with that. Okay, so renounce myself and I turn unto God. Well, that in itself, like prayer, sometimes I have a hard time, and I shouldn't, finding time for prayer. Prayer is our spiritual food. But sometimes I'm like, I'm too tired. Well, I wouldn't have been too tired if I had made time for God. And I like, I'm sorry, I wanted to do this thing so much, and this thing does kind of have to do with you, and I'm tired, and I don't want to pray. I can pray in my sleep. You know, it's also, let me see, I'll go up a little bit here. I don't want to get kicked off. Turning into God. Turning unto God also is obeying the law. And sometimes we don't want to obey the law. Sometimes the law puts a crimp in our style, doesn't it? And even though it's best for us, it's like, I'm not going to do that today. Or later on, we catch ourselves and it's like, I didn't do that today. I'm sorry. For it behoveth thee to glory in my name. So it's best for me to glory in God's name. Because his name is eternal. Mine isn't. That makes sense. And anything that has his name is probably going to be eternal. So if we're involved in that, okay, that's probably a good thing. It's best for me to glory in God's name and not in my own name. It's going to be on a gravestone someday if I'm lucky. To put my trust in God and not in myself. Well, the easy one on that to me is, well, I'm a finite being. I'm lucky if I can do some housework. I'm lucky if I can get up on time. You know, so while we are to strive to be trustworthy and trust, in what we can do, we really need to trust in God who is eternal and knows everything. He's the omniscient, the omnipotent, the mighty, the powerful. Um, we may mean well, but just think about going to somewhere that's important, even if, your house of worship, church, temple, mosque. You get up at the right time. If you're lucky, you eat your breakfast or whenever it is you go, you know, or you don't eat. Maybe you don't eat when you go. You hope your intention is to get there and you're going to get there on time, but you don't see the big traffic jam because there's a big accident up the road. Uh, Maybe at that point you might say a little prayer, dear God, I really wanted to get there on time, and somehow you puts in your head, oh well, why don't you go around that back way? And you're arguing with them, like, no, that's a slow way. It's like you're not going anywhere now. Just go that way, you'll get there. You know, something like that. Maybe that you probably have something that you can think of that's along the same lines. So we put my trust, our trust in God, and not on ourselves, since God desires to be loved alone and above all, that is. Yet we're supposed to love everybody. We're supposed to love even our enemies, or at least not hurt them. So does that love for others and enemies, is that because we're designed, to love God by Himself? Because it sounds like you almost want to just cut everything off, close your eyes, and just stay in a state where you're in constant contact with God and you do nothing else. I don't think that's what He wants. And it's hard for me to understand loved alone, unless it's like loved alone, no other gods. But He didn't say that. But maybe, that's the type of thing that the Word does for us to help churn our little gears and say, what else could that be? I desire to be loved alone. Loved alone above all that is. So, all above your career, above your family, above your nation, even above the world, above your charity, above your pets, above your things. So, I don't know where that fine line is, where, unless that's the motive for everything. Maybe that's the motive for everything, is we try to love God and we have to ask his help because I can't do it. Baha'i under construction. Need another nail or something. Okay, there she is. And we find out also by not being attached enough, stuff happens. Things get taken away. Freedom gets taken away. People get put into prison and they shouldn't be. Yet, Baha'u'llah and his family were in Akka, in the prison. And some of the, after Baha'i says it was joyful. It was happy. In the worst place on earth. How can you be happy? I mean, just the fact you might be happy, but everyone around you is suffering and they're sick and some are dying and not in a nice way. How? I mean, it just kind of reminds me, well, you're down here somewhere, in the pit, and what is being asked of us seems to be so far away. Yet, this time is a time where the capacity of mankind has been raised, you know. But I guess it also has to do with our effort to try to get there. I don't know. I just find I'm just pounding my head into the wall. So let's read this one more time, the way it should be read, and maybe I'll, help us all to get a little more deepened, to get another nail in the head. I gotta get up to the greeting. O Son of Spirit, there is no peace for thee, save by renouncing thyself and turning unto me. For it behoveth thee to glory in my name and not in thine own, and to put thy trust in me and not in thyself, since I desire to be loved alone and above all, that is. So I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Aloha.